Let's get right into it. Number 8. The Titanic myth. Alright, so we all know the story of the Titanic, right? Big fancy boat hits an iceberg and sinks. Well, not exactly. The Titanic sinking wasn't just a case of, oops, we hit some ice. It was more like a perfect storm of screw-ups. First off, let's talk about the boat itself. The steel they used to build it was basically the dollar store version of what they should have used. When it got super cold, that steel became more brittle than your grandma's sugar cookies. So when they hit that iceberg, instead of bouncing off like a rubber ball, it cracked like an egg. Then you've got the crew being, well, kind of stupid. They got multiple warnings about icebergs in the area, but instead of slowing down like any sane person would, they were like, nah, full speed ahead. They didn't even have enough lifeboats for everyone on board because apparently they thought having enough lifeboats would make the deck look too crowded. That's like not wearing a seatbelt because it wrinkles your shirt. So yeah, while the iceberg was definitely part of the problem, it was more like the final straw that broke the camel's back. The Titanic was already a disaster waiting to happen. It just needed a push. Number 7. The Flat Earth myth. You've probably heard this one before. Back in the Middle Ages, everyone thought the Earth was flat, and Columbus proved the Earth was round. Well, I hate to break it to you, but that's complete nonsense. Here's the thing. Educated people have known the Earth was round since ancient Greece. We're talking about guys like Pythagoras and Aristotle figuring this out over 2,000 years ago. The ancient Greeks even calculated the Earth's circumference with surprising accuracy. A mathematician named Eratosthenes did it, using nothing but shadows and some basic math. And this was in 240 BC. So why do we think medieval people believed in a flat Earth? Well, this myth actually started in the 1800s. Some writers wanted to make the Middle Ages look super primitive and dumb. They basically went, look how stupid people were back then. They thought the Earth was flat. Not like us modern smart people. The reality is, by the Middle Ages, any educated person knew the Earth was round. It was taught in universities. Medieval scholars wrote about it. Sailors navigated by it. Columbus didn't sail to prove the Earth was round. He actually thought the Earth was smaller than everyone else did, but he was wrong and everyone else was right. The real argument wasn't about whether the Earth was round. It was about how big it was. And Columbus got lucky that there was a whole continent in his way. Otherwise, his crew would have starved to death in the middle of the ocean. So next time someone tells you about medieval people believing in a flat Earth, you can tell them that's about as historical as dragons and unicorns. Number 6. Napoleon being short. You've probably heard that Napoleon Bonaparte was a tiny, angry man with a huge ego. Maybe you've even heard the term Napoleon complex to describe short people who act tough to make up for their height. Well, turns out that's completely wrong. Napoleon was actually around 5'6", which is 168 centimeters. That was pretty average for a French dude back then. So why do people think he was short? Well, it's actually pretty funny. See, the French and British used different measuring systems back then. The French inch was longer than the British inch. So when the French said Napoleon was 5'2", they meant in French inches, which is about 5'6" modern measurements. But the British saw an opportunity to mock their enemy. They started making cartoons of Napoleon as this tiny, angry man, and the propaganda worked so well that people still believe it today. It also didn't help that Napoleon's personal guards were all super tall guys, so standing next to them made him look shorter than he actually was. But yeah, Napoleon wasn't short. He was just surrounded by really tall dudes and got dunked on by British propaganda. Number 5. The Salem witch burnings. So, you know how everyone thinks the Salem witch trials involved burning people at stakes? Yeah, that never happened. I know what you're thinking, but I've seen it in movies. There were stakes and fire and everything. Well, Hollywood lied to you. Again. Here's what actually went down. The Salem witch trials were definitely real, and they were definitely horrible, but nobody got burned. Instead, they hanged people, 19 people to be exact, and one guy, Giles Corey, was pressed to death with heavy stones because he refused to enter a plea, which, by the way, is probably way worse than burning. Imagine having stones slowly crushing you to death while you're just laying there. Several others died in jail while waiting for their trials. But again, no burning. So why do we all think there were burnings? Well, that's because in Europe they did burn witches. It was their go-to method for dealing with supposed witches, but in colonial America, they followed English law. And English law said witches get hanged, not burned. Number 4. The Thanksgiving myth. You know the story, right? The Pilgrims land at Plymouth Rock. They're struggling to survive. And then the friendly Native Americans show up with some corn and turkey. They all sit down together for a nice, peaceful meal. Everyone's happy. and that's why we celebrate Thanksgiving today. Well, not exactly. First off, that peaceful feast? It was not so peaceful. The only reason the Wampanoag showed up was because they heard gunshots. The Pilgrims were firing their guns in celebration of a good harvest, and the Native Americans came to check out what was going on. It's like hearing your neighbor's car alarm going off and going over to make sure everything's okay. Also, this wasn't some magical moment of friendship between two cultures. The relationship between the Pilgrims and Native Americans was complicated, to say the least. Because after this feast, things got really ugly, really fast. The relationship between the settlers and Native Americans turned violent. We're talking about wars, disease, and the forced displacement of Native Americans from their lands. And Thanksgiving wasn't even made a holiday until the 1862. Abraham Lincoln made it official during the Civil War to try to bring the country together. That's like 240 years after the supposed first Thanksgiving. Number 3. Nero playing the fiddle while Rome burns. So, you've probably heard this one before. Emperor Nero is sitting on a hill and playing his fiddle while Rome burns to the ground below him. It's become a symbol for terrible leadership and not giving a damn about your people. But here's the thing. It never happened. First off, the fiddle didn't even exist back then. The violin wouldn't be invented for another 1,000 years. That's like saying Julius Caesar was playing on his PlayStation. Second, Nero wasn't even in Rome when the fire started. He was actually in Antium, about 30 miles away. And when he heard about the fire, he rushed back to Rome to help. He opened up his gardens for people who lost their homes. He organized relief efforts. And he even helped rebuild the city afterwards. So, why do people think he fiddled while Rome was burning? Well, Nero had a lot of enemies, and after he died, they wrote histories making him look like a complete monster. It's like your ex writing your biography. The real Nero was no saint, but he definitely wasn't playing music while his city burned. Number 2. Let them eat cake. So, you've probably heard this one before. The story goes that when Marie Antoinette, the last queen of France, was told that her people were starving because they had no bread, she just casually said, "Let them eat cake," like it was no big deal. It's supposed to show how out of touch she was with regular people. Like, oh, you can't afford bread? Just eat this more expensive thing instead. It's the 18th century equivalent of telling homeless people to just buy a house, but she never actually said it. The phrase first showed up in a book called Confessions by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He wrote about some unnamed great princess saying this. But here's the kicker. Rousseau wrote this when Marie Antoinette was still a kid, not even in France yet. So why do people think she said it? Well, during the French Revolution, people needed someone to blame for all their problems, and Marie Antoinette, being a foreign-born queen who lived in luxury, was the perfect target. They started spreading all kinds of rumors about her, like how she spent too much money on clothes and parties while people were starving. And this cake, quote, fit perfectly with that image they were trying to create. The truth is, while Marie Antoinette wasn't perfect, she wasn't as horrible as people made her out to be. There's actually evidence that she tried to help poor people and was concerned about their welfare. But hey, why let facts get in the way of a good story, right? Number 1. George Washington and the cherry tree. You've probably heard this one before. Little George Washington gets a brand new hatchet as a gift, and like any kid with a new toy, he's super excited to try it out. So what does he do? He goes and chops down his dad's favorite cherry tree. When his dad finds out and asks who did it, little George supposedly says, "I cannot tell a lie, father. I did it with my little hatchet." It's a cute story about honesty, right? Well, this whole story was made up by a guy named Mason Locke Weems in 1806. Weems was writing a biography about Washington and thought, you know what this needs? A heartwarming childhood story about honesty. So he just made one up, and it worked. People loved it so much that it became part of American folklore. It's still taught to kids today as an example of honesty. The funny thing is, the real George Washington probably would have found this story ridiculous. He was known for being a pretty serious guy who didn't like this kind of dramatic storytelling. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.